And we set out in the springtime with our bindles and our boots, and we reveled in our poverty, abandoning our roots. A brand new path, adventurers, all lonely, bold and brave, breaking free and making do, and telling tales of how we'd save ourselves.
Hello, and welcome to Tell Me About Your Song, the podcast where I talk to musicians and songwriters about a song they've written. Today, I'm talking to Marian, and the song she'll be talking about is named Oregon Trail. So where would you like to start, Marian?
This is part of a record called Standing Stones. And in that record, one of the things I'm interested in looking at is the stories we tell ourselves, like the myths that we have about who we are and the myths of, Western culture, myths of America. And this is one of those myths, the Oregon Trail, right? It's about being strong and independent and adventurous and setting out on your own and conquering the landscape and finding a place for yourself. All the things we want to do in sort of our individualist society. It's about self-actualization and about claiming a space in the world. And that myth is so important to us. But I've been thinking a lot about how it doesn't necessarily hold up either to our experience or to a good model. Like, it might seem exciting to think of being a pioneer and going out and, finding your own way in the world. But the more you actually read about what it would have been like back then, about A, how horrid it was, B, about the myths that the pioneers were often being sold about free land out west, when of course that land was already occupied. And about the idea that it was our destiny to command and control the landscape and to have, a country from sea to sea. That was not a given. That was something that we decided, and then we made it real. And that may or may not have been a decision that sat well with everyone who was affected by it. Part of why I wanted to write about this was that it is one of our founding mythologies. It's a real historic event, but it's also a mythos that is larger than this one event. And that's why I wanted to tackle it and both honor it and dismantle it at the same time. Every now and then those think pieces come along about generations and what millennials are doing and what Gen X is doing and everything like that. And I was part of this cohort, and a lot of my friends were too, that fell kind of between Generation X and Y and millennials.
Mm-hmm.
And we never got a name, but I still feel like our experience is kind of fundamentally different. And we're too young to be Generation X, but definitely too old to have a similar experience to millennials in a lot of ways. And I read several articles in which some scholars and demographers argue for the existence of a Generation Oregon Trail, which is kind of a small cohort. I think it's like 1976 to 1987 or something like that, or 1986.
Mm-hmm.
And that describes the generation of people who started school, their first few years of school without networked computing. But by the time they completed school, the internet was fully fledged and running. And so kids after us grew up typing from the time they were, very, very small. They don't remember before computers in the home and before computers in school to do all their tasks. In fact, they stopped needing to even offer keyboarding classes in a lot of schools. They didn't teach typing anymore because the kids would just arrive at school already knowing how to type. And that was not true for my group. We had to go through hours and hours of typing classes, Mavis Beacon and all the rest. So this song is about the peculiar life of that particular generation. I think this cohort of people is really cool and inspiring and interesting and innovative and has made a lot of cool things. But at the same time, there's a little bit of a sense of opportunity drying up in a lot of ways. And I wanted to write something about that. And I thought the Oregon Trail was the perfect allegory for it. It describes the name of the generation because of that video game we all played.
Mm-hmm.
And it also describes sort of a modern look back at that journey that has been mythologized as one of the cornerstones of the American story, Did you play Oregon Trail when you were young?
Oh, yes.
I did too. I like several different generations of it too, from the big floppy disk to the little floppy disk to the hard drive version to the. Apparently, someone told me there was an Oregon Trail 2 and an Amazon Trail, and they kind of did a couple spin-offs and sequels, which surprised me. I hadn't heard of those, but
yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, hundreds of people have gotten in touch with me to tell me how this hit a nostalgia spot for them. So yeah, I'm kind of revising that history in this song. Like it starts out really great. It's we set out adventurous.
And we set out in the springtime with our bindles and our boots, and we reveled in our poverty, abandoning our roots. A brand new path, adventurers, all lonely, bold and brave, breaking free and making do, and telling tales of how we'd save ourselves.
And then we gradually realized that it wasn't just us, it was everyone else.
Till everybody else we knew had started on the journey too. And we were not phenomenal. No, we were not phenomenal. We never were phenomenal. Just part of our whole generation's vague instinctive mass migration. We were not exceptional. No, we were not exceptional. We never were exceptional. We were longing, 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 though, and true. We were dreaming that the world was dreaming too.
And maybe we were being brave and individual and making our own choices, but maybe we were also just part of this kind of global phenomenon that we couldn't really control. The opening sense of possibility that we had as young people when the internet was new was very much hit by, two different bubble bursts. First, the Silicon Valley and kind of that portion of the economy realizing, no, the internet doesn't do everything and it doesn't change everything. It does some things, but not all of them. And then the housing bubble burst that, no, we can't all own a home on the income that we have. No, we're never going to pay off our student loans. No, we're never going to get out of credit card debt.
Mm-hmm.
No, we're never going to stop moving around the country. I think the number of times a person my age has changed cities is just like astounding now. It's really, it's so different from the generation before. This is also part of a song cycle, and this is kind of in the middle beginning of it. So there's some resolution that answers this song a little bit later in the album. This is in the "What Are We Doing" stage at the late beginning of the record. I wanted it to start feeling like a very wholesome folk song. Like I'm working on a folk festival this weekend, and I wanted it to sound just like a good old classic tune, maybe a little more complicated words, but the same chords and the same feel as, a Willie Nelson kind of song.
And the harmonies too.
Yeah, the harmonies exactly are very straight at the beginning.
Surrendering exceptional to lighten up the load. We woke up.
But the deeper into the song you get, the more your perspective shifts, sort of. I think of it as like a moment when the sky opens and suddenly you realize that the world is so much bigger than you thought.
Was all
and that occurs in the middle of the song, and we have this we have a big and sort of shocking key change. It's not the way you would usually change keys from A to E. It's by way of a C major chord, which is not in either key, but that's the pivot between those two worlds, and it's meant to feel this grand opening into a much larger universe.
We bought some land out west, don't know where seemed to feel like home. And digging in the yard, we found somebody else's bones. The moment that the shovel hit, we bowed before the things we should have known.
Gradually, our speaker realizes that they thought they were going out into empty space to make a name for themselves. And in fact, they were going out into someone else's space. And that doesn't feel very good.
We're not the first ones here. We never were the first ones here. Just part of our whole generation's childish frontier recreation.
But if you don't do that, then there's not enough food, there's not enough security. It's a little bit of a story of getting lost along the way growing up.
Adventurers, we were longing, 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 and so lost. We were barely what we needed, and it cost.
And it reminds me of a lot of friends my age. I do have some friends my age who are married and have, houses and kids and things. But, coming on 40, it's not nearly as many of us as we thought, right? And a lot of us are not housed or are moving around the country all the time, not settling in one city, or we're divorcing and remarrying, or not settling into a family structure, getting old enough to be like, well, I guess I'm not having kids then, without it really being ever a voluntary choice. I think that's one of those surprises that hits you along the trail. And that's what this song is about. After we transition to E, then I start adding chords that are more modern, chords that were not in the original sort of lexicon of vintage country music.
First ones here, just part of our whole generation's childish frontier recreation. We were not adventurers, no, we were not adventurers. We never were adventurers. We were longing.
So I start adding like a flat 7 chord, a D major chord, and I start adding minor 4 chords, and it gets basically just messier and messier. It's like the chord progression sort of starts to disintegrate. And at the end, the harmonies get weirder and weirder and weirder, and then the harmonies kind of fall apart too, and then the two backing voices kind of abandon the main voice and wander off on their own and get lost.
We have not found shelter yet. We've eaten what we meant to plant, and the 12 ages of man are circling hungry overhead. And grandmother would disapprove. We will make no more miles today.
It's fun. It's like the oxen of Runaway. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually a reference to a video game too. There's a lot of video games in this song, not just Oregon Trail. I got hooked on Don't Starve, which is a ridiculous. It's a very silly video game. It's a survival game.
Uh-huh.
And I played way too much of it in the year that I was writing this record. And it informed a lot of my thinking about just like what it really does take to survive. When you eat the seeds that you were supposed to put in the ground, you survive another day, but you've jeopardized your future. And that's very much, me and my other kind of like late 30s friends having to spend our savings or still being in debt without any sort of assets. And it's not meant to be too hopeless, but it is meant to be like a moment of clarity that setting out on this journey and realizing we're not as far as we thought we were, and we haven't found anywhere to stop and plant.
It says the 12 ages of man are circling hungry overhead.
Uh-huh. And I have 11 songs that are divided by those 12 ages of man.
Ah.
Yeah, I really worked on the structure of this one because I like the idea of the 12 ages of man is sort of a late medieval, pre-Renaissance Western European idea that if a person lived all 12 ages of man, they could get to be 72. So there were 12 ages and they were 6 years each. And they corresponded to like the months of the year, and they corresponded to the seasons and to the horoscope and to a map of the body and everything. They sort of connected all these things that weren't necessarily connected. But I liked that idea. And so I have these 11 songs that are about different stages of life. And this one is very much the like getting out of college and then realizing that it's not as easy as you thought, Late 20s, early 30s, you've accomplished so much and you've been set on this grand trajectory. And then you get out there in the world and you're like, oh, hang on. It's kind of a letdown, but there's more to come in the story.
You were talking about this in terms of it being part of a song cycle. So what comes before this and what comes after it?
What comes before this is a song about childhood, about being young, exuberant, and feeling like you can fill up your whole world, or like the world cannot contain you. That's a song called No Paper. The original working title was Lauds, which is the name of the prayer for that hour of the day that corresponds to the 12 ages of man, that corresponds to all this big structure that I was kind of plugging into from early like Renaissance literature. You can leave that out if you want.
There is no paper big enough for what I'm going to draw today.
It's a crazy rhythm jam, actually, with very little melody, but it has like a horn section and some really wild harmonies and just insane electric guitar. It's a very like expressive, creative kind of Jackson Pollock-y song about being young and feeling full of possibility. It's also about protests and protest signs and marching. The line is, there is no paper big enough for what I'm going to draw today. and there's nothing that can contain me or that can contain my message. That feels very, very youthful to me, both about like little kids before they learn that, art is supposed to look a certain way and they're just like scribbling and filling up the whole page. And like just the energy that people have like in college when they're learning everything and excited and have a lot of passion. And so, yeah, it's kind of a younger age.
We never were exceptional. We were longing, longing, longing though.
And then we transition to this song, which is a little bit like, well, we thought we were going to go out into the world and conquer it. And then we had another think after we got out there.
Mm-hmm.
And the song after it is the title track. It's called Standing Stones.
We drew 9 lines from east to west. We drew 9 from north to south. Then we stitched our names in concrete veins through miles and miles and miles of ground.
It sort of reconciles that. It's about how our impulse to build things and make things and design and scratch and leave our mark and change the environment, how that impulse is really universal. We all have it. And also how it's impermanent, like it's going to pass away, but that doesn't matter because it's just what we do, and that's beautiful. It's a validation of humanity in the middle of acknowledging that we have a finite span. So, yeah. And then it goes on kind of more into like middle age and then midlife crisis, of course, and then into kind of acceptance. Some of the other songs on this record are much, much less complex. This one's through composed, like the chords don't necessarily repeat and the lyrics don't repeat very much. But yeah, it does reward repeat listening. It's definitely a journey and hopefully catchy too. Like people will be leaving humming it, even though they can't remember any of the words because they don't repeat.
Have you played this song out?
Yeah, we play it out and it's hard to communicate that groove change. So I just kind of have to do without it. But that's part of why I was so excited to put it on a record too and have it sound different on the record. I like doing it out. I would just die to do it with a trio, so we could sing all the harmonies. But that's, again, the joy of getting to record it. There's a video for it that I really am proud of. Pat Race made a Oregon Trail style video of it. And as it happened, somehow someone pinged the son of the man who created Oregon Trail, one of the 2 men who created Oregon Trail. And he emailed me, and then then his dad emailed me. So I got a message from the creator of Oregon Trail, which was great.
Wow, that's awesome. What did they say?
They really liked it. That was it. That made me happy. I was shocked and surprised. His name's Don Rossich, and he got in touch just to say that he was honored by the tribute and that he thought it was interesting. Says, thanks for the tribute to the pioneers and the game I co-invented 45 years ago.
Wow.
And I can't believe it was 45 years ago because I experienced it more like 33 years ago. Mm-hmm. But yeah.
Yeah, that video is great. I started watching it and then I kind of had it on the background and I thought it was just the actual game. And then I went back and looked at it and I was like, wait a minute, one of the things is a cell phone charger. And
Yep. There's
and you come across this pile of skulls, I think right around where the modulation occurs.
Yeah, it takes some twists. We were hoping actually that at the beginning people would think it was just kind of a GIF that repeats, it doesn't really go anywhere. Mm-hmm. But gradually it kind of gets wilder and wilder and takes you out of our safe little sweet country song beginning.
I think that this idea is one that I stole from Kai Risdahl because I listened to your interview, or I don't know if it was an interview per se, but when you were on Make Me Smart.
That was fun.
But he kind of asked you about being in Alaska as, and kind of engaging in this sort of pioneering spirit that's involved in living up there.
Well, I think the connection is very much that if ever there were a place where that American mythos is embodied, it's Alaska for sure. There's some very bold, strong, self-reliant, competent people up here, You can love them or hate them, but people kind of assume that you can split your own wood and maybe fly a plane. And it's weirdly like one of the most and least sexist places I've ever been. Mm-hmm. The most because we have really difficult rates of abuse and things like that here because there's a lot of substance issues. But it's also the least in that people here very much assume that I run my own business. So they don't think I'm arm candy when I go to a party, right? Mm-hmm. We've had women politicians at a higher rate than a lot of other states. We have tons of women business owners. And if you're out at a cabin, people won't flinch when they give you a tough job. They won't be surprised if you pick up something heavy to carry it. It's just very, it's nice. I like it. I like the presumption of my competence, even if I'm not always competent. Uh, but the funny thing is, up here in the land of the most independent people anywhere, is where I find that people are very, very clear on the fact that we're not independent. None of us are independent. We all rely on each other, and we're all connected in really concrete ways. Like, so and so does this job, and so does that job. And in a tiny town, they're the only people who do, and we need them, and we rely on them. So we have to take care of them. I know people who've literally gone out into the woods to their own property to clear logs, use those logs to turn them into a cabin, live on that cabin in the summertime, and have just cut every board themselves, right? But those people are the ones who are the most aware that if they slip up and hurt themselves and they don't have a friend, then they're screwed. If they don't have help, if they don't have everyone else to come over and assist at the crucial moment, then their house is not going to get put up. You can't do it yourself. And that's that kind of twofold lesson here is you can be as independent as you want, but you can't do it yourself. And especially when nature is really a factor the way it is here. And I really like that. So that's kind of what this whole record is about, is you can be as independent and strong as you like, but we still need each other. Alaska's had a huge influence on this record. It's like embracing and at the same time unmasking the pioneering spirit as being a lot more complicated and a lot less pure and not at all what we dreamed it was.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't look how we thought in the movies, in the video game.
Right. So if people would like to hear more of your music, what should they do?
You can hear more of my music. I have 10 albums now and then a few singles. At bandcamp.com/Marian Call. So just look me up on Bandcamp. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me at a Facebook page. And you can find me on Patreon now. That's new. The new album is just on Bandcamp as of right now. It should be up in a lot of other locations very shortly, iTunes and Spotify and all that.
Great. And I'll put links to all that. I put together a blog post.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
For each episode. So I'll put links to that. And that blog is at yoursongpodcast.tumblr.com, TUMBLR. So my name is Jacob Haller, and I have a website at jacobhaller.com. You can find all my music there or on Bandcamp and links to my other podcasts and projects. And as I mentioned, there's a Tumblr blog for the show notes at yoursongpodcast.tumblr.com. And there's also a website for the podcast at tellmeaboutyoursong.com. You can rate and review us on iTunes or Stitcher or any of those places, and I would love it if you did that. Or just tell a friend if you think they would enjoy this episode, send them a link. So with all that said, we're going to go out and listen to the song we've been talking about, Oregon Trail by Marian Call from her album Standing Stones. Thanks for listening.
And we set out in the springtime with our bindles and our boots, and we reveled in our poverty, abandoning our roots. A brand new path, adventurers, all lonely, bold and brave, breaking free and making do, and telling tales of how we'd save ourselves. Till everybody else we knew had started on the journey too. And we were not phenomenal. No, we were not phenomenal. We never were phenomenal. Just part of our whole generation's vague instinctive mass migration. We were not exceptional. No, we were not exceptional. We never were exceptional. We were longing, 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 though, and true. We were dreaming that the world was dreaming too. Oh. Surrendering exceptional to lighten up the load. was all a road. We bought some land out west, though nowhere seemed to feel like home. And digging in the yard, we found somebody else's bones. The moment that the shovel hit, we bowed before the things we should have known. For we were not the first ones here. Of course we're not the first ones here. We never were the first ones here. Just part of our whole generation's childish frontier recreation. We were not adventurers. No, we were not adventurers. We never were adventurers. We were longing, 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 and so lost. We were barely what we needed, and it cost. We left our stolen settlement and did not much look back. No more traveling songs or epic tales. The road a fatal fact, and the GPS it misdirects. The travel stretches on, with autumn setting in by now, and winter just beyond. And we have not found shelter yet. No, we have not found shelter yet. We've eaten what we meant to plant, and the 12 ages of man are circling hungry overhead. And grandmother would disapprove. We will make no more miles today.
So where would you like to start, Marian? See, I warned you, and it still is totally.
You were serious about that, yeah.